Welcome to the Real People, Real Stories podcast, brought to you by the Paciello Group, bringing you the interesting and diverse stories of individuals working to make the world a more inclusive place.
Hey, welcome to Real People, Real Stories, brought to you by the Paciello Group. I'm your host, Mark Miller, thanking you for helping us keep it accessible. If you're enjoying Real People, Real Stories, if you think it might help someone, share it. Tell someone about it. Hey, even link to it from your accessible website. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We appreciate every time you guys are all with us. We have some great people on the podcast with us today. My good buddy Todd is co-hosting. Welcome, Todd. And we also have Jeff Steinberg. Welcome to both of you.
Hey, guys, how are you?
We're doing great, Jeff. How are you?
If I were doing any better, I'd be you, Mark, and we'd be twins.
I don't know about that, but I'll take it. So, Jeff, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then I know that you've done some exciting things through the time. So we'll dig into some of your books. I think you have a book coming up. But first, just lay the groundwork for us. Who are you? What do you do? Why are we talking to you today?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, Mark, it's a real pleasure to be on the program. And Todd, it's good to see you again.
Always good to see you.
Always good to be able to hang out with you.
That's right. You and Todd go way back, huh?
Yes.
You've known
in
each
fact,
other.
I'm on this program because I was recommended to you.
Hi, Todd Waits.
Yes.
Yeah, right. We've known each other probably since 94 or 95, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
I didn't realize it was that long.
Oh, yeah.
That was a while ago.
Yes.
We were both teenagers and,
God and us were kids.
Right. So where did you guys meet?
I believe it was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's when I lived in. You were on tour, and you spent the night at my house. We had chatted over the phone and knew each other, but yeah.
So Todd just mentioned that you were on tour. Can you tell us a little bit, Jeff, about what that means? What were you on tour doing?
I am I'm an entertainer. I'm a singer. I'm a speaker. I'm an award-winning comedian, humorist, author. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. I'm incredibly talented, very, very cute, and mostly humble. And if you don't
very humble, I see. How do you maintain the humility amongst all that talent, Jeff?
Well, humility prevents me from telling you how truly humble I am.
Is that what it is?
That's what it is.
So that's a lot of, that's a lot of different things. It sounds like if there's a stage, you can get up there and do all sorts of different things on it. How did that come about for you? Like, how did you discover you had all these different talents, and how did you develop them and become known for them over time?
Well, my main message is that each of us is a masterpiece in progress. And when I step out on a platform to speak, the first thing I want them to hear is quit focusing on the handicap and start appreciating the gift. Todd was mentioning earlier, there is so much negativity, before we went on, that is, there's so much negativity in the world, especially in social media and all of that. And the truth is, we're all whining about something we can't do anything about, when in fact, we're not doing anything to make a difference in our own world, to build up, to encourage. Let me go back and give you just a little bit of a background. I was a thalidomide baby. Thalidomide came into the United States in 1948 and hovered around the Northeast United States, and it was given to moms to help them to keep the pregnancy. It boosted the mom's immune system and helped them when they were spotting or nauseous or whatever it is that they needed help with. It did that and a lot more. What we found out was that babies who were products of the drug thalidomide ended up with limb deficiencies or limb deformities, missing bones or missing arms or parts of arms and legs or whatever. And I was born with what the doctors call phocomycelia. I have no arms. I have one little stump on this side and nothing on this side except the shoulder. My both legs were bent scissor crisscrossed, and the doctors didn't really think I was going to live. My grandmother saw me for the very first time, and she called my father at work, and he rushed to the hospital, and he was the one that made most of the decisions from that point on. My mom did not know about my disability until my grandmother let it slip when I was about 17 months old.
Wow.
Sitting in the kitchen, she said, "Ruthie, he's alive." My mom put down whatever she was using, kitchen utensil, and she just leaned against the counter and she said, "Mom, why won't they let me see him? Is he ugly?" And I think she thought I was facially deformed or retarded. And my grandmother got up, walked over to her, put her arm around her and said, "No, Ruthie, he's not ugly. He's beautiful. He has a Yiddish cut, a Jewish head, a Jewish face." My mom and dad and my oldest sister, Linda, came to see me for the very first time when I was almost 2 years old in a children's welfare shelter in Philadelphia. And she paced the floor with me in her arms, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then turned, placed me back where she picked me up, swung around, stood as tall as her 4'8" frame would hold her, and told my father, "Irving, I'm ready to leave. Take me home." My relationship with my parents was very difficult from that point on. It went from once a week to 2-3 times a year, maybe. From the time I was 2.5 years old, for about the next 5.5 years, I was in and out of Shriners hospitals for crippled children in Philadelphia. There, they operated to straighten my legs. They fitted me with my first orthotic leg brace, and fitted me with my very first arm, which was nothing more than a stump socket with a spoon attached.
Wow.
I went to school at Shriners, and when I was about 8 years old, the doctors in one of their regular rounds came by and said, "We're going to send you home. We can't do anything more with you till you stop growing." I looked at Dr. Moore and told him to give it a week, because I'm still only 4 feet 6 inches tall when I'm as tall as I'm going to be. I lived at home for about 9 months, but it got to be too difficult for my mom and dad to take care of me and now 3 girls. And it was the girls that were the problem, Todd. It's always the girls that are the problem. So
the difficulty in care for you, Jeff, was that centered around health, or was it more just, you didn't have arms, people probably had to do a lot of things for you?
Oh, I'm probably the healthiest person in this discussion right now. I mean, because like I said, the thalidomide actually boosts the immune system. I mean, I'm immune to just about everything. I don't even go away when you want me to.
So it's really just about the additional.
It was really about my mom being able to get me dressed for school, my mom being worried about me going out to play in the neighborhood with other kids, my mom worried about me not being safe, and me only having 3 sisters and no brothers and my dad would go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he would get home at 4:30 in the afternoon. So if I needed help using the bathroom or whatever, it fell to the girls, and that became problematic in itself. But as far as my health goes, I mean, aside from the surgeries that I had, I was pretty healthy.
Okay. That paints a good picture. I can envision that challenge that must have been going on, especially with a bunch of young people. It's you're young, your sisters are young.
Yes.
Gender difference. I mean, there's got to be a lot of challenges when it comes to someone who needs.
I had one sister that was 5 years older than I am.
Okay.
But It was difficult, and to say the least. But it was also difficult for my mom and dad because I was always that unspoken conversation, that unspoken topic
Mm.
when they were with friends or when we would go out or whatever, and people would look and, like that. And my mom blamed herself. My dad blamed himself. Neither one of them would really talk about it because you didn't really do that in the 50s and 60s, talking about it.
How did it make you feel knowing that you were a topic of conversation often because of all these things?
I was a ham. I liked being the center of attention, even if, even if they didn't talk about me in front of me all the time. The only time it really bothered me, in 1960, Halloween Day, 1960, my father and mother drove me 63 miles away to the Good Shepherd Home, which is a home for kids with disabilities and old people in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I was going to live there with these kids that had disabilities and these adults. And I sat in the superintendent's office in this big, huge padded leather chair. And the superintendent and my mom and dad all talked about me, but nobody talked to me. And I didn't really want to be there. And at that point, I was in a situation where I was really not happy.
Yeah.
But that was really the only time. I've always been pretty optimistic, and I've looked at my life in terms of my abilities and not in terms of what I couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
When I was little, I could take a watch apart using my mouth and my feet. I could feed myself with my feet.
Wow.
Hey, Mark, can you feed yourself with your feet?
I can't.
Can you get your feet to your mouth?
Probably not.
I don't know. That's not what Todd tells me. He told me you were pretty good at putting your feet in your mouth.
Yeah, I'm putting my foot. I walked into that one. Nope.
Something about rap music.
Yeah. Oh man.
We had that. That was before the mics heated up, Jeff. We don't need to go back into
Okay.
differences of opinion.
Well, you have two musicians on the podcast and one rap.
I get it.
So the two don't cross,
Yeah. All right. So this is interesting to me, right? Because I've got Todd. You're in this conversation primarily because you're a good friend of Jeff's and you've known him for a long time.
And a very talented musician.
What's that?
And a very talented musician.
Oh, you guys are both talented. It's not even a joke. You guys are both very, very talented. So I have a lot. This is like I'm the one of these things doesn't belong, right? That's who I am. That's my square here on the Zoom, because I don't have any musical talent, and I certainly don't share some of the things that you guys share. But Todd, you also this is interesting to me because you're missing an arm as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't lose your arm until later in life. So the big difference here is that Jeff was born with the limb, with no arms, right? And sort of grew up in that condition. But you as a teenager, which I think is one of the most emotionally tumultuous times anyways, when you were a teenager, you had two arms and then lost one of them. And so, to me, I want to unpack a little bit like what that difference is, like how that hits you emotionally when it's, when you have it and then lose it versus when you're born not having your limbs or whatever the case is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just with a difference from the rest of the people around you. So, I mean, Todd, like listening to Jeff and his positivity sort of throughout his life, despite the fact that has challenges that the people around him didn't have. How do you feel about that? How is that different than your experience? Having this sort of drastic change as a teenager.
Yeah, that's a really great question because I don't know what it's like to be somebody that, that first day of kindergarten, you sit at your desk and the other kids scatter. I've heard stories of that. Kids born.
Is that true, Jeff? I mean, is that an experience that you've had where other kids were?
Well, when I was in grade school, the first couple of years, I was in a school for kids with disabilities.
Okay.
I started to go to public school, and the kids would look at me. I had pretty much developed enough of a thick skin that I would look at them and tell them take a picture; it'll last longer.
Yeah.
And when they would start to say something to me, I just kind of aim it back at them, because that was the way I was. I didn't know anything different, and I could show them how I could do things that they didn't think I could do,
Right.
but my way.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like that maybe the foundation or the sort of breeding ground for some of the talents that you developed, like humor and you're obviously poised and you can speak and you can sing. So Todd, I kind of diverted you in the middle of your explanation there, but you were saying that it was hard for you to relate, but just hearing Jeff's experience as it contrasts with yours, like what is that?
Well, it's interesting because I lost my arm when I was 14, and it was to a rare childhood bone cancer, and it happened. There were no symptoms. My arm broke, and it showed up on an X-ray, and soon thereafter, I had one arm, and I was starting chemotherapy. It happened so fast that I didn't have a whole lot of time to digest it, but I was thrust into a world of. I became the most popular kid in school. So that was kind of interesting for me, but it wasn't for all of the good reasons, because I would, I went from, thrust into kind of a strange world where now for the rest of my life, I knew I could never walk into a store without people pointing and staring and whispering and things like that. And, I'm so glad that I had music in my life. I played keyboard since I was 4, and since then I've toured the world as a keyboard player and have played with big national acts. And that wasn't some kind of coping method. Like when I've known Jeff for long enough to know that when he does comedy, he's just being him, man. He's not, people could look at that and say, that must be your coping mechanism. People assume that we're not okay with who we are and that there's some deep rooted, no, man, I was just into music, and I wanted to be a rock star before I lost my arm, and after I still wanted to be a rock star. And so I got to live some of that life. And just like Jeff, he's out there touring, singing, making people laugh at his own expense. And it's not some kind of coping mechanism. He's just a funny guy, and he likes to see people laugh, and he's filled with talent. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, other than my life certainly changed. There wasn't something, I wasn't born this way to where it was something I was used to by the time I started noticing things. It happened, and then there it was right in front of me. And I've certainly been bullied. I've certainly been made fun of. I was being 14 and missing an arm, trying to be left-handed, which I never was. And then chemotherapy, I was bald from that and was really sickly looking. If I got out of my home turf, so to speak, out of my own middle school, and then maybe at a football game or something, I remember, somebody asked if they could borrow my comb because I was bald, and the Cancer Society paid for a wig, and I couldn't win with that either. But back then, the technology isn't what it is today, or it wasn't what it is today. It looked like a piece of plastic Lego hair. So I wasn't fooling anybody, but people made fun of me for that. And my perspective had to change of that.
Yeah.
Not much I can do about that, but.
So initially you were angry, but you're a pretty funny dude too, Todd, right? So initially maybe you're angry at that stuff, but then you do learn to kind of manage it better through humor and some other things. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I joked around so much prior too, so I don't know that my personality shifted. The only time my personality shifted was when I was like, oh my gosh, this is never going to end. I can't win. And
right. It's not a fate. Yeah.
But I'm so grateful to go through that, because I also go around and speak at a lot of schools about anti-bullying and being comfortable with yourself. And I could never be able to speak about that passionately had I not experienced it. But the great thing is I've experienced overcoming and having big dreams and chasing those dreams and seeing them happen. And that's the story.
Yeah.
That's the real secret is you got to have a story to tell.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, it's one thing for somebody to say you shouldn't bully because you might hurt somebody's feelings.
Right.
But it's another thing to say, okay, I faced some bullying, and everybody in the audience looks at you and says, yeah, so what?
Mm.
You know, get over it. But if you stand up there and you can showcase or tell them a story that makes them feel what you feel, or and in your case, Todd, showcase a bit of talent, play something on a keyboard that says, hey, you know, look at what I've been able to do since then, or I get up and sing a song. I think what helped me a lot was that I met some people when I was 11 years old, and they were Mennonites, and they taught me what Psalm 139:14 really meant. That I am made to be awesome and wonderful, that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And I stopped making it about what was wrong with me and made it more about, look at what I can do and what I can be. So what's your excuse?
Yeah. You know, I think that's a great point. And you had said something earlier about, you know, kind of expressing that, hey, this is just the way I was. This is what I had to work with. And, you know, the way I interpret it is these are the things I wanted to do. I'm going to go do them just like anybody else would. And, you know, I really think about that. And when you phrase it like that, we're not that different, you know, just because you have, you know, something, a disability or a challenge that people can see that's unusual, it doesn't necessarily make you that different in terms of the challenges in life, because I have things I'm really bad at, or, you know, I mean, I have ADD and dyslexia, and, you know, so I could go on and tell you stories about that growing up and going through school and you know, difficult moments with that. But like you, it's just something I had to learn to deal with, you know what I mean? So that's me. And, you know, the listeners out there are probably now thinking like, oh, well, hey, this is what it is for me. That's what it is. I can't, you know, I can't sing. I want to sing. I can't sing, you know? So there's just different sort of abilities and disabilities that we all have to deal with. And I think that that's an unbelievable perspective to come to the table with, you know, especially Jeff, when people can look at you and just sort of immediately, like you guys said, you know, you walk into a store and people are automatically whispering about you, which I find a little, I'm surprised people are still doing that, but people don't whisper about, you know,
I find myself
with ADD and dyslexia. You know?
Yeah, I find myself being a little bit more frustrated with the quote disability community than I do with the general public.
Okay. That's interesting.
Mostly because for several years, and I tell this story in concert sometimes, I'm not very good with political correctness. I never was, okay? I had a 5-year-old that once, you know, looked at my hook and wanted to know why I didn't have any hands. And I told him I used to bite my fingernails, and one day I went too far. He's in trauma therapy, even as we speak. But I sang and spoke for the President's Council on Hiring Persons with Disabilities in Washington, D.C. for about 4 years. And, oh, by the way, he never shows, just so you know. If you're going to speak for that group, he will not be in the audience. But I went to sing and speak for that group in this one particular year, and I must have used the word handicap way too many times, because this rather elegantly dressed blonde lady in a suit came up to me and she said to me, Jeffrey, now I remember what it meant when my mother used to say Jeffrey. It usually meant things were not going to go well for me. She said, Jeffrey, if you're going to make it in this industry, I said, industry? I said, Mary, we're manufacturing handicapped people. She said, if you're going to make it in this movement, you're going to have to learn the proper terminology. I said, great. So what is the proper terminology? And she said, disabled. And I said, but I'm not. She looked at me funny and she said, Excuse me? I said, Mary, disabled suggests that I am not abled. Let's see, I drive a car. I'm married. I have a family. I'm a recording artist. I do graphics design. What part of my life is disabled? And she looked at me. She said, well, how about physically challenged? I said, aren't we all? She said, I beg your pardon? I said, Mary, go to the top floor of the Washington Hilton in downtown Washington, D.C. Go up to the very top floor, open the window, step out on the ledge, jump off, flap your arms as fast as you can, and you'll find a challenge, a physical challenge you can neither meet nor beat. And I looked her in the eye and I said to her, if it is my responsibility to learn the proper terminology, it is your responsibility to use the terminology properly.
Mm.
We are people. I have no arms. Todd has one arm, but we are still people. Some people walk with wheels. Some people walk with crutches. Some people walk with sandals. You know, we need to stop categorizing people on the basis of what we think they can do or be.
Yeah.
And start encouraging people to use their gifts to make the most out of the lives of everybody they come in contact with. And so my message that you are a masterpiece in progress is about look in the mirror, quit focusing on the things that are wrong in your life, on the things that are that handicap you, and start appreciating the gifts, because every one of us has gifts.
That's awesome.
And that's a powerful message, you know, and I think that, you know, like I said, the difference maybe between the things that challenge me and the things that challenge you is nothing more than yours are maybe obvious on the onset to somebody. And so when you say that, it makes it hard for other people to really disagree with it, right? You know, it makes them have to face those things for themselves. You know,
everybody has challenges, and everybody has things that threaten to handicap them, whether I can see it or not.
Yeah.
ADD, you're dyslexia. My wife is dyslexic. She can make up words that have never been invented before.
We probably know some of the same words.
Yeah, probably. But here's the thing. I encourage her to do what it is she's good at.
Yeah.
And she's an excellent writer as long as she's got somebody to proof it.
Right. Yeah. Or uses technology. I mean, for me, I've learned to use, as I'm sure both of you guys have, I've learned to use technology to make
She got her master's degree in her 60s.
Yeah.
You know, look, you do what you got to do. She's a chaplain. And I didn't think when I met her that anybody would want to marry me. You know, because and even my mother said to me, it's not fair to your wife. Don't get married and don't have children, because your wife would have to take care of you and a baby. Well, my baby is 43 years old and he's got 2 children of his own. One's 14.
Wow.
Or 13 rather. The point is, I never saw my life as handicapped. Always saw my life as, okay, I do things differently, but I can still do it. You know?
Yeah.
I admire Todd because of his musical ability. If I could play a keyboard, that would be what I would do, because of anything that I wished I could do is to sit down and play keyboards, because I can hear it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see my fingers doing it. It's just, you can't see my fingers doing it. You can't hear it.
Yeah.
You know.
Mutual admiration.
But you sing, Jeff, too, and that kind of, does that sort of that must tickle that kind of musical desire.
Oh, yeah.
While you can't play keyboard, you can participate in a real valuable way in music.
I had a keyboard player that traveled with me, and he told me, he said, you know, you sound an awful lot like Neil Diamond. And I said, who's Neil Diamond? He said, he scoots too. And I said, okay. And I actually got to meet him in California one time at the National Easter Seal Telethon in LA.
Neil Diamond, you met.
Yeah. Actually, no, I actually met him in Memphis at a show he was doing for St. Jude. And I was living in Memphis. And they introduced me and they said, Mr. Diamond, this is Jeff Steinberg, and he's a musician too. And they handed him one of my CDs. And I stuck my hook out and I said, hi. I said, people tell me I sound like you. Has anybody ever told you you sound like me?
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he says, no, not that I can recall. And I'm thinking, get a life, Neil. Rent one.
Let's hear a little Neil Diamond line.
Hello again, hello. Just called to say hello.
Mhm.
I couldn't sleep at all tonight. I know it's late. And I couldn't wait. Hello.
Nice.
I'd clap for me, but I'm shorthanded.
That was kind of, I'll do it for you.
See, Todd, you bring life to the phrase. This is the sound of one hand clapping.
See?
He did good. He tapped on his desk. I heard him.
I did. I tapped on my desk.
Yeah. That's
You know,
funny. It's
some-
funny because that's how my son and I are skateboarders, and the skateboarders clap for each other by smacking their skateboard down. Click, 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 click. Sounds like
Hockey players do the same thing. They tap their hockey sticks on the ice whenever they're doing something like that.
So, Jeff, we've talked about a bunch of your talents, right? That that you're a singer, that you're a comedian. And by the way, anybody who wants to just type Jeff's name into the search bar of Google or YouTube, you're going to come up with a lot of videos of Jeff doing either one of those things, right? So if you want more Jeff, it's pretty easy to find.
YouTube channel T Giant 1.
It's what?
T Giant 1.
For Tiny Giant, T Giant 1.
Yeah, that's my YouTube channel.
Got. Oh, okay, cool. And we'll make sure that that's in the show notes as well. But there's more, right? Like, wait, there's more. You've also written a book.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the book that you've written?
The book is called Masterpiece in Progress, and the book title was based on a song that was written for me in 1983.
Okay.
And I had told an audience one time that we were each like a masterpiece, becoming one color at a time, all that God had designed for us to be. And sometimes those colors blend, and sometimes they stand right up against each other in cold contrast. And we did a series called All That I Can Be, I Can Be, at a church in Southern California in Van Nuys. And when I got home from that week, my keyboard player, his name is Jeff Rudloff, called me on Monday night and he said, I wrote the title song for your next album. Now, normally he doesn't tell me anything about it. He just tells me I wrote one.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, are you going to tell me anything more? And he said, yeah, you want to hear it? And it's called Masterpiece in Progress. And basically, the chorus says, I may not look like it yet, but you better bet I'm becoming what he wants me to be. I'm a masterpiece in progress, and it won't be too long till I'm done. A few more strokes of the brush and the master's touch, and I'll be in the image of the sun.
Oh,
And I wrote this book after I had appeared on the Old Time Gospel Hour TV show in Lynchburg, Virginia with Dr. Jerry Falwell, and I sang a duet through it all with Doug Oldham. And that launched my career. By the way, October 29th, last week, 2 weeks ago, I celebrated 48 years since that appearance.
wow.
That launched my full-time career.
Wow.
But I wrote the book because I wanted people to understand. In fact, when I talked to my mom about it prior to writing the book, and she said to me, Jeffrey, I don't know why you want to do this. She said, it's nobody's business but ours. It's my life. And I said, Mom, how many women do you know who might have had a setback in their life, like a child born with a disability or an accident in their life or some sort of tragedy with a family member or difficulty, who wouldn't be encouraged by your story of a child born with no arms and no hope and no, no optimistic outlook on the part of the doctors or his family. And yet he stood on some of the biggest stages in the world and on national television. And so we wrote the book to tell the story of Jeff Steinberg. And we've sold over 50,000 copies with very little or no publicity, because we've never had a major publisher that has been willing to do any major publicity on it. So most of my sales has been in my concerts from the back of the room. I'm working on another book.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. We've got to wrap up.
Talked about that.
Give us a little bit on that the second book you're working on now.
The second book has to do with how we see ourselves. I can tell you, if you do this, or this, you'll be a success. But only if your success is based on the direct results. Like if making money makes you successful, then if you do this, and this, and you earn enough money, you might be able to consider yourself a success.
Right.
The problem is, if you're not fulfilled, if you don't understand who you are and you don't understand who God designed for you to be, you're getting all the wrong answers because you're not asking the right questions. And so this book is about asking the right questions. And I've got 5 questions that I ask in it. Who am I? Because everybody's got a story and most of us don't like our story. I'm sure that if given an opportunity, Todd could tell you that there was a time in his life after the cancer when he didn't like his story. There were all the bad things happened to him and none of the breaks. It didn't matter whatever talent he had, and the same thing with you, ADD and dyslexia. And I'm never going to make it to be the person I want to be because everything seems to be going backwards for me. We all have excuses. Second question, what are my gifts and my abilities? What are my disabilities? Because you can't acknowledge one without the other. My limitations are the things I cannot do. And I have to acknowledge my limitations. Every single day, I have to have somebody help me take a bath, get dressed, to be perfectly blunt, wipe my rear end. Those are things I can't do for myself. And so I have to learn to accept my limitations. Third question, why am I here? I told a prisoner in England that I was here because I wanted him to be able to go back to his cell, look in the mirror, and see redemption, and see a masterpiece and not a criminal. To realize that there's something more to his life. Fourth question, what are my limits and my boundaries? Now, I said my limitations are the things I cannot do. Well, my limits have to be the things I will not do. I will not sacrifice my morality or my good name for a gig or a dollar. The things I will not do. My boundaries keep me from infringing into your area and hurting you and having to do over what I should have done right the first time. And the final question, what kind of a mark will I leave behind for having been there? And I'm not talking about when I'm in the box and everybody says, my, doesn't he look like himself? Which, by the way, I'm putting a sign in the hinge of my casket that says, don't I look like myself, so that they don't have to worry about asking. The truth is, that same prisoner that asked me, why am I here, was released from that prison 6 weeks later after having made a commitment to faith the night that we were there. Went back to Nigeria and became a pastor.
Wow.
And I played a part in that.
Wow.
Every single day, we leave a mark in somebody's life.
Yeah. Every
Every single day, we make a mark. And so those are the 5 questions that I have in this book I'm working on. And then I've got another idea for another book. And it just came to me this past week when I was attending an entrepreneurial event with a whole bunch of people who had all this technical knowledge and said that they were speakers, but they didn't know how to speak. And I thought, you can have all the best content in the world, but if you don't know how to speak, and they're up there, and I'm a real estate expert, and I can tell you how to, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, remember when I opened and I said, my opening line when I walk out on stage is quit focusing on the handicap and start appreciating the gift. You have that much time to grab everybody's attention, and only that much time.
Yeah.
And then you have to have a story to tell. And then you have to be able to look in the eyes of the people that you're talking to and take them from point A to point B to point C, because now they can relate to how you became successful, and they can start the wheels turning in their head.
Yeah.
But all the expertise in the world isn't going to make you a speaker.
Right.
So I've got an idea for that. And the same thing applies to singers. I mean, Todd can tell you, how many times have you been in a church or in an organization where you've heard somebody get up and sing, and they're looking at the ceiling, and they're looking at the doors, and they're and you know, and they got their eyes closed because they're afraid to look at the audience.
Right.
Things you don't do.
Yeah.
But my 48 years of experience can help people to know how to do that. So if you're looking, and of course I'm available, and they can contact me, tinygiant.com or jeffsteinberg.net, or they can call me in Orlando, Florida, 901-754-JEFF, and get in touch with me. I'd love to come and speak to your group, or I'd love to do it virtually. And I'm not cheap, but I'm easy.
Well, listen, Jeff, that's all wonderful. And I really appreciate you sharing all that you've shared. You really have a unique insight, I think, on the world that everybody can benefit from. We are, believe it or not, out of time. We really have to wrap up. So we will make sure that people know how to get a hold of you, know how to find your book, know how to find your next book and your next book, and all of that. But I can't thank you enough for joining us. And Todd, thank you for hooking us up with Jeff. What a wonderful guest. What an inspirational human being you both are. I tell you, you know, it makes my job easy, and it's great to do a podcast like this when it's people like you that show up on it. So thank you both for that.
And thank you, Mark, because by sharing who you are, you inspire a lot of people who have ADD and who have dyslexia and who look like you.
I hope so.
Which ain't so bad.
I hope you're right. All right. Well, this is Mark Miller thanking Jeff and thanking Todd and reminding you all to keep it accessible.
This podcast has been brought to you by the Paciello Group, the experts in digital accessibility. Stay tuned for more Real People, Real Stories podcasts coming soon.